Welcome back to As It Turned Out, hosted by your favorite CU sophomore, Pananika Maruna. This is the podcast about the messy, beautiful process of figuring it out as we go. We're not here for perfect paths. We're here for moments of doubt, the big pivots, and the quiet wins that don't make it onto our LinkedIns. We're talking about what it actually looks like to grow, adapt, and to make your own way, one unexpected move at a time. Let's get into it. Today I'm sitting down with Herman D'Hooge, a tech builder and big picture thinker who spent his career connecting dots across hardware, software, and design. He's all about fresh ideas, challenging the status quo, and mentoring people to see new paths forward. Let's dive into his journey. When you were just starting out as a scientist and an engineer, what did you imagine your career would look like, and how close did it come to where you ended up?
So I graduated as an engineer from the University of Ghent in Belgium, which was actually not called engineering, but it was called applied science. And it was heavy on science and very, very light on applied. So when I graduated, I really felt not ready to really enter the workforce. But I joined Bell Telephone in Antwerp, and the assignment was for the whole team to develop the next generation telephone switching system, which was going to be computer-based rather than mechanical or electromechanical. I was barely a couple of months on the job, didn't have a clue as to what I was supposed to be doing or what I was doing. And somebody from the London office came in and asked if there were any couples, individuals, engineers in Antwerp that wanted to go to the United States to learn about this thing called the microprocessor. And the company that was doing this was Intel in Aloha, just outside of Hillsborough here in Portland. And about 5 couples raised their hands. All of them had little kids. So this was the beginning of the summer. So they all had to go back in September to put their kids in school. But I didn't. So after 3 months, they said, well, who wants to go back? And I was the only one raising my hand. So they lengthened my expat assignment for another year. And so the way it worked is we worked under Intel managers on essentially developing microprocessors and the operating system and the whole system around it. And by learning, by doing, we would take that knowledge back to Bell Telephone in Antwerp and be better prepared to design computer-controlled systems, computer-controlled telephone systems that way. And about 10 months in my second assignment, I got this message all of a sudden that says, hey, we changed our mind. We're no longer going with the Intel part. Sell your stuff, get out of your apartment, quit the rent, sell your car if you have one, and come back as soon as you possibly can. So I decided, I finally started learning something, and I wanted to see this thing through. So I talked to my Intel manager and said, here's what happened. And he said, yeah, we know. And I said, well, I'd love to stay until the end of the project. This was in 1979, by the way. And he said, well, we have this non-cross-hiring clause in the contract between the two companies. We can't hire you, and you can't hire any of our engineers to come back to Antwerp and help us out. But if you lay low for a couple of months, we'll just rehire you back. So my initial question was, what do you mean? What does that mean, lay low? Because I wasn't that well versed in the English everyday language. And he said, well, just quit your job, get health insurance, and then after 3 months of cooling down, we just hire you as an independent Intel hire. And so what initially was meant to be like a 1-year, 2-year project became then a 35-year career, and here I still am.
Yeah.
So my only expectation really coming out of school was to prove to myself and my peers that I could be a great engineer, because I really like an imposter. I really felt I didn't have what it took in terms of the skills and the knowledge to really do engineering work. And over the first 4 or 5 years, mostly at Intel, that confidence built up. But that was my own expectation. Beyond that, I had no notions to what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. And
yeah. Well, you have experience in a lot of fields like hardware, software, research, customer products, and design thinking. What's been a thread that ties all these seemingly different chapters together, and how did that kind of make you the person you are?
Well, I think the thread is that it's all unplanned. Don't have a plan. And as Mike Tyson, who's not known to be a deep philosopher, used to say, everybody has a plan until they get kicked in the teeth. But I really describe my career as it's just a series of very lucky accidents. But what I learned over the years is you have to be in the right place at the right time, and you have to be open to recognizing an opportunity when it presents itself. So I do believe there's value in planning because it makes you reflect and think about what you want to do and what's possible. But then I think you should get rid of the plan itself and really open and be open to following paths wherever they might lead and whatever opportunities come your way, which often are more interesting than what you might have imagined at one time or might even thought would be possible at one time. In fact, what happened is it's one pivotal point was my first probably 10 years at Intel was a pretty linear path. I worked for the same manager, which is unheard of for 10 years these days. I mean, if you have the same manager for 3 months, it's probably a big deal. But in those, it was a wonderful guy and the team was wonderful and it was just absolutely amazing experience. So each time a project or the work that I was working on came to an end, he already lined up the next thing for me to go do. And it always felt like I was growing, learning new things. And it was just, I was just kind of growing into a path somebody else laid out to me. And then I think it was the late 1980s, the big project that we all worked on for the last 6-7 years, hundreds of engineers, by the way, both from a German company and Intel. But our German partner pulled out, so all the funding went away and Intel could not continue this thing on their own. So the project was terminated. So normally what I would do is I'd go to my manager and say, so what do we do next? And I remember very vividly going into my office, my manager's cubicle and asking, okay, we all lost our job. What do we do next? And he said, I don't know. You have to figure it out for yourself because we all lost our jobs. And that was sort of became a pivotal point that now I felt like no one's going to tell me what that path's going to be. I have to create it for myself. And it felt like at the same time scary, but also empowering. Because what I started to do, since I'd already built the technical confidence that I was seeking, I started making proposals to vice presidents across the company. And most of them said no, or they didn't even read your message. But it only takes one to say yes.
Yeah.
And if you got one that says, yeah, let's try this, but not with 12 people, let's try it with 2 people and grow it from there and see how it goes. Now you got a toehold and a foothold and you can start doing new things. But I think my whole career is sort of a string of accidents where I happened to be in the right place, recognized the opportunity, and then took that different path. And as Yogi Berra used to say, when you get to a fork in the road, take it.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of my advice to when you get to an interesting place, recognize there's a fork in the road, and then just go down that path that you don't know where it may lead. I also learned in those days that I did really well in ambiguous situations, which scares more people. Some people that I work with, they want to know exactly what I will be doing 3 years from now, 3 months from now, or otherwise they get very, very anxious. And for me, it's almost the opposite. If I already know what I'm going to do 3 years from now, it's like, what's the point? There's no surprise, there's no excitement anymore. So that's something I learned about myself. So the way I got into from engineering into design was in the mid-1990s, somebody at Intel started hiring anthropologists. And you can say, what the heck is an anthropologist who study people doing in a high-tech company that makes computer chips? But the purpose was that they would study people and in behaviors, and they could interview them and see what their needs are and how computing doesn't play a role in their everyday lives. And out of those insights would then come new ideas for technologies. And someone said, go talk to those people and see what they're doing. So I did. What became obvious to me was they were really good at doing the research and telling the stories of what they found, but there was this big gap between their insights into the human psyche and human needs and what typical deep technical engineers need, which are specifications that you can measure with voltmeters and with other instruments. So this big gap was missing. And then lo and behold, at the time I was part of an Intel lab called New Users, which is sort of like, we have a solution, we're just looking for problems that it can solve so that people will buy faster computers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we can grow the market. It's sort of a reverse human-centered approach, right? You do the technology first and you figure out anybody interested or not. And one of the areas we were exploring were toys for kids that kids play with, young kids.
Oh, wow.
And one area was sort of this notion of if you connect a low-cost toy to a laptop or a computer in the home, you can actually create an intelligent experience that is much richer than what a toy alone can do. So we started doing some prototyping, and someone mentioned that Mattel, the toy company, Barbies and Hot Wheels and those kind of toys, had approached Intel to figure out if they would be interested in licensing their Intel brand to put on more technically advanced toys. And after they showed their vision, Intel decided we're about real technology, not just toys that squeak and that sort of you press a button and it does something. We want to create some real technology. So I found out about that, and someone said, go figure out if there's something interesting there. So that got me hooked up with the Mattel folks. And out of that came a whole new toy line called Intel Smart Toys, which happened sort of in 1998 to 2001, which were consumer-based toys. And the way it worked is Intel provided engineering, technology, and Mattel provided the design, the user research, the marketing, and then the Asia high-volume low-cost manufacturing. But it got me exposed to how a consumer company really gets into the minds and the hearts of kids and consumers and parents who have to pay for the products and so forth. So I got to be a witness to what that whole human-centered design process looked like in practice. And then you may not remember, you may be too young, but back in 2001, the internet bubble burst. There was a period when you could do nothing wrong when you had an internet company, whether they made money or not. And then ultimately that whole bubble burst, and then Intel contracted back to its core, like most companies did, right?
Yeah.
And as part of that, they sold off all these peripheral businesses, like the toy business. And a small company in Atlanta bought the toy business, and some employees went with it, and I decided to stay with Intel. So again, I lost my job at Intel. And again, I started making proposals, and the proposal was to take, before they leave the company, take about 12 people and take this capacity of applying human-centered design to toys, but apply it to redesigning the boring beige box, which was the Intel Microsoft PC in those days. And lo and behold, somebody said, yeah, this is exactly what I need. Come in, but I can only have budget and headcount for 3 or 4 people. So unfortunately, a lot of the experience went away as that people looked for jobs and went to Nike and other places. But it gave me a foothold again to start this new capability inside of the company. And that grew from 3 people to about 45 people several years later. And we ended up doing work across the entire company. Intel had a health group in those days doing health appliances and healthcare, digital home to figure out how consumers in the home and smart television and all that stuff would work out. And so that's, again, sort of an example of just being in the right place at the right time, connecting the dots, and then go take that fork and see where it might lead. And then soak up as much as you possibly can, and then figure out how that applies to whatever might come next. And
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely describe you as both a teacher and a mentor. What's one lesson that you try to pass on to students and innovators that you wish you had learned earlier?
Let's see. I think one thing is be curious about everything, because the most interesting opportunities may lay at the intersection between 2 disparate fields. Something that didn't seem to be connected before, now everything becomes technologized and becomes artificial intelligence infused and so forth. But I think be unafraid to reach out to completely and step into completely other disciplines. Another thing is perfect the art of asking really good generative questions. And since I retired, I see a lot of the students that I teach and mentor at the Pacific Northwest College of Art Collaborative Design Program. They all have to do a thesis. It's a 2-year postgraduate graduate program. They have to do a thesis in a topic that interests them. And they all have these big meaning-making projects or meaning-making things that they want to kind of build the confidence to take them in the real world. Like, how do you create a clean fashion industry? How do you create an economy of repair? So these aren't just designing a product, but designing an entire sort of eco-political system. And they want to figure out, how can I have an impact on that? And what I always tell my students is, whenever you sort of pick an area of your thesis, spend at least the first month just reveling in the problems and the questions. Don't even think about solutions, because solutions, if you start infusing solutions too early, they will already shape way too much before you sort of feel you have a sense of the lay of the land. And learning good questions are questions. I say questions are good as they are an invitation to explore with others. And you can ask the same question in so many different ways. Like, for example, I went to a workshop not long ago that was really touting the benefits of self-managed teams. And everything they said was anything that is not self-managed, where you have a boss and a manager, bad. And if you're self-managed and you decide what you want to work on from 1 hour to the next, all good.
Mm.
And no matter how you ask the question, it's all this black and white kind of thing. But if you ask the question in the form of, under what conditions or what circumstances are self-managed teams really effective and what makes them less effective? Or what are the properties or the traits of the individuals that make up in a self-managed team to really make that formula work well? So by just reframing it, it becomes an invitation for people to explore and open up a space. Whereas otherwise it tends more to polarize. People put up shields and it holds them back. But the idea of question storming, which is brainstorming purely in the problem space and the question space, I think is one of the best things. Get mentors, not one, but many different mentors can focus on different areas. Network, I think, is just crucially important, as you are a living example of doing that. And then also be very critical. So don't assume the first thing that you learn is going to be the gospel or the right thing, but ask yourself. So usually when I teach my students about a certain topic, then the following class, I have them read the sharpest critiques I can possibly find that tell you it's all BS. And now they thought I knew it, and now they thought I no longer know it, but now they are relearning in a way that builds a critical angle and a critical approach into their rediscovery of why does it work and when would it not work. And so to me, that's paramount. Be open to whatever the world throws at you.
Yeah. And I know you've spent years thinking about conditions to help teams and companies innovate successfully. What do you see as one of the biggest enablers or blockers of innovation inside organizations today?
Well, it's interesting. So my last years at Intel, I gave myself the title innovation strategist.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that means, but you must admit it's a great title. I also was a freelancer for the last 5 years inside the company. So I could float from area to area and really apply my quote unquote wisdom wherever, or my talent wherever I thought it was going to be most beneficial, assuming they wanted me there. Which is a very fascinating approach a different approach to working rather than just sticking into a solid path. But the thing that I noticed is when you talk about innovation, first of all, invention is not innovation. People often equate invention with innovation. Innovation is not innovation until it creates value. It really means you get it to the market in terms of products or services. And it really creates value for the company that innovates. The second thing is most organizations do innovate in their way that they have learned to innovate. And often innovation that is different from what is sort of built into the system's DNA is the one that is met with the most resistance. So I think companies by default must have friction in the system to prevent new ideas from bombarding the stability of the system. But you have to also realize that organizations are complex systems in the sense of complexity, which means the culture of an organization is the thousands of interactions that happens between the human beings with their personal agendas, people that have competing for budgets and for headcount between different groups, the policies of the company, the reward systems of the company, what the competition is doing, on and on and on, and all those interactions between all those elements sort of create collectively what company culture is. And even then it sort of differs from different areas into the company because maybe the type of people they attract are different and so forth. If you interfere in a complex system, the system will react because it has stabilized itself. So in other words, it's optimized itself to deliver what it does really well over and over again, and everything else is sort of seen as costly waste. So if you come in as an innovator with something that the system can't process, it's natural and it has to be expected that the system is going to push back. What else is there? So a little story is years ago, the CEO at Intel asked a question in passing, why can't Intel come up with an iPod? This was just after Apple announced their iPod in the early 1980s, I believe.
Mhm.
And keep in mind, we killed a audio player project with real audio players in the marketplace pretty much at the same day that Apple launched their iPod.
Mhm.
So I started thinking about that very question, and I wrote on the Intel intranet an article, why can't Intel come up with an iPod? And I analyzed it in 3 dimensions. First of all, is Intel capable of coming up with the idea of an iPod? The answer was an overwhelming yes. I've seen many, many amazing ideas in the labs that never went anywhere because they didn't have sort of a path to value. But the answer was yes. The second answer was, well, who's the we doing the recognizing? Are they the same people that are part of this rigid system that is going to try to maintain the status quo? And those people should have, if you the recognizing means you have the resources to make something happen around it. The answer to that one was no. And then the third question is, even if we were able to recognize it, would we have the patience and the stick-to-itiveness, if that's a word, to see it through long enough for it to succeed and create value? And that may be multiple iterations because you never get something completely right on the first try. I think even it took Apple 3 or 4 years to become a $1 million wonder with the iPod. Intel has been notorious to have little patience. Microsoft used to say, when Intel shuts down a business, that's when we get interested because it means that they sort of did some of the heavy lifting. And now we sort of can bank on their insights and we can now start a business based on what they abandoned because they don't have the patience to stick with it.
Yeah.
So I also believe that as you start innovating in a way that is not common to the way an organization innovates by default, there's 3 things to keep in mind. This, what do I have to forget from the old company that's going to hold me back? What can I borrow from the old company that actually can help me because there are strengths there that I can leverage, like volumes and channels and manufacturing processes. And then the third one is, what do I have to really learn in order to really understand this new space? And I'm sort of referring to a book here, which is still one of my favorites, called Strategic Innovation, 10 Rules for Strategic Innovation, that talks about those things. But it says what really matters when you start something completely new, it's a black box. You don't know impetus and reaction of that system. So you shouldn't hold yourself to metrics that are valid for a mature business in which you understand exactly how things behave. But the only thing that should matter is how fast can you learn? How fast can you start understanding the insights of what that new innovation and that business around it can afford? But yes, I also would typically say is, don't start, if you start an innovation effort in a company, don't start at the mouth of the funnel, the innovation funnel. Start at the back end and make sure all the pieces are in place so that that path from new idea to value creation is in place and things you don't get constipation in the pipeline. Otherwise, they will get stuck, and then all of a sudden funding runs dry, and then things get, we're never going to do that again. That was a waste of money and so forth.
Well, kind of wrap things up. When you reflect on all the twists, pivots, and experiments in your career, what's one surprising truth you've learned about how things actually turn out?
Well, it's sort of embedded into everything I talked about is don't overplan. Be open to whatever gets thrown at you. But people used to say, how come you always get the fun jobs? And I started thinking about it, and it's like, well, I didn't get them, I made them. Or I discovered them, and then I stepped into that role, and at worst I can say no, and you try something else. And so feel that you have agency, even in a big company. You can reinvent yourself multiple times, maybe especially in a big company, because there's multiple facets to it. And don't be afraid to do so. And what I also would say is, don't let anybody else define what success means for you. Only you should define what that means. So even society should have no say in that. Your parents, your family, it's a very individual thing. What does success mean to you? For me, it wasn't about moving up. It was more about moving sideways and having a fascinating journey, going in all those new directions and contortions, and learning new things along the way.
Thank you so much. This has been
You're very
great.
welcome.